And for more on this developing story, as the 4-day Gaza truce begins, joining us live on the broadcast, we have with us Jody Cohen. Hi, Jody. The truce has begun between Israel and the Hamas militants. What are you gauging at the moment?
Good morning. Yes, so the pause began at 7 a.m. local time. We have heard that within 15 minutes of this pause, that some rockets were fired and sirens were sounded along the southern communities bordering Gaza in Israel, meaning that potentially Hamas or potentially some other group there fired some rockets into Israel. We haven't heard of anything in terms of a response, and I have to say it's actually not surprising that this happened, because in previous rounds of fighting, when ceasefires have been agreed, we have every time at first, when the ceasefire comes into effect, we have seen rockets fired into Israel. Sometimes there will be a little bit of fighting backwards and forwards in the beginning, but ultimately, eventually, in each round of fighting we've seen over the years, that has held. So it remains to be seen now if this really is a pause and if the rockets will have stopped, or if we are going to see further and if we'll see an Israeli response. But we're also hearing then that at 4 o'clock this afternoon, the first of those hostages are going to be freed. We're hearing that the first focus will be on the women and the children. Remember, there are around 40 children being held in Gaza. And from this deal, we're hearing that I think 30 of them are thought to going to be released. The other 10, Hamas are saying, are not in their hands. So it will remain to be seen what happens with those. The families of the hostages last night were informed who is due to be released today. And they have been warned of, that they could be released, but with lots of provisos, because there's a lot of mistrust on whether or not Hamas will pull some tricks at the last minute or try and make changes to the list at the last minute. There's a lot of psychological warfare going on here as well. So the families are understandably in a lot of anguish over that. The families whose relatives are not today going to be released have also been told who will be released. They've asked the media not to release those names because of the fact that there is this mistrust that Hamas might change the names of the people who are due to be released later on today, but we will see later on today. And then there's a process of, once they're out,
yes,
they will be seen by doctors, they will be seen by the security staff, will see that they're okay, and the family members will then be reunited.
Right, Jody, you speak of how 15 minutes after the truce was announced at 7 a.m. local time there, the Hamas militants fired towards Israel. Are we expecting any retaliation from the IDF? Because if that takes place, then the ceasefire will not take place. It will not withhold.
Well, some could argue that perhaps the pause hasn't taken place already if rockets have been fired from Gaza into Israel. It really, it remains to be seen. I believe that it will hold, because I think from both, there was an expectation from the Israeli public that there's a knowledge that every time there is a ceasefire in every round of fighting we've seen over the past few years, that there has been this initial rocket fired towards Israel when the ceasefire goes into effect. To the extent that I warned my children when they went to sleep last night, early in the morning, we could expect rocket sirens because this might happen. This has happened in previous rounds of fighting. Whether or not Israel responds, I'm not sure that it will, because the whole country is very much, waiting with bated breath for these hostages to be released. I have to say there is also concern. It's not an easy decision, and I would have hated to have been the one to have taken this decision, because on the one hand, the public's mood is absolutely the priority is get as many hostages back as possible. On the other hand, the public mood is you have hundreds of thousands of people who've been evacuated from their homes in North and South Israel towards the center of Israel because of this fighting, and they won't feel safe to return home until, let's focus on the south here, but until Hamas has been dismantled. And that's the other goal of the government, that they've said that the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, their goals are, number one, to bring the hostages back, but number two, to dismantle Hamas. So they have to make sure that, and ultimately, they're saying that they will go back to the fighting after this maximum 10-day pause that we're talking about, because they need to dismantle Hamas to make sure that the massacre on the 7th of October would never happen again, which Hamas has said it would want to do again and again.
Right, Judy, we're also just learning that the IDF has completed its operational assessment of the ceasefire lines this morning, and the IDF forces destroyed the terrorist tunnel that was exposed in the Al-Shifa hospital.
Yes, the report has literally just come out saying that the tunnel towards one of the tunnels, the terror tunnels, they would say, belonging to Hamas, that's under the hospital, that they have destroyed the entrance. We've also heard yesterday that the Israel Defense Forces destroyed 300 entrances to tunnels across northern Gaza. Now, remember, the intelligence is suggesting 500 kilometers of these tunnels have been built by Hamas, mainly under northern Gaza, very focused around Gaza City as well. And this has been the way that the Hamas terrorists have been evading the Israeli soldiers, and also, I think from the IDF perspective, the strategy has been to try and keep the terrorists underground, to try and get control on the ground. And then we're going to see this pause now. Definitely, it's said for 4 days of pause in fighting. Right. So it could last up to 10 days. So for every day of pause after this, as long as around 10 hostages are released, there'll be another day's pause in fighting, up to 10 days. And then after those 10 days, the fighting is expected to resume, and the tunnels will be very much the focus of this fighting. And also, they'll be looking at Hamas around Khan Yunis, which is another big center of Hamas activity.
Right, Judy. My last question to you before I let you go on this very developing story. Why did it take so long for Israel to agree to these conditions which were put forth earlier as well? Do you think Netanyahu is under pressure? Because various surveys have come out which clearly lament on how Netanyahu's popularity is also dipping in the country.
The question is, I think, that why would it take so long for this hostage deal right now and the pause to have come around? But it's not because these conditions had always been offered by Hamas. The earlier conditions that had been offered by Hamas were vastly, vastly different. They wanted a whole month pause in fighting, reportedly, for only 10 hostages to be exchanged. So what's taken this long, and I think that's a natural process with negotiation, is number one, it takes time to negotiate, and number two, the Israeli government would say that it's been the Israeli ground offensive that have enabled them to get Hamas to change the terms, so to swing so far in the other direction, to say, no, for 10 hostages released, you'll get 1 day of pause, not a month's day of pause. So that's the first thing. In terms of in terms of Netanyahu's popularity, yes, various surveys have been coming out, not just the last few days, but also the last 9 months, showing a dip in popularity for Netanyahu. Right now, the priority across the country, the feeling is that this priority is to deal with the war and to deal with Hamas and to get the hostages back. There's going to be a commission of inquiry looking into the responsibility of the intelligence failure on the 7th of October. That will happen after the war. And certainly we're going to be seeing debates in terms of a future election coming up. But also let's just see the outcome, I think, on